All right, let's jump right into this. We all want to live these bigger, braver, more authentic lives, but what's really stopping us? In this breakdown, we're going to dig into the incredible, research-backed frameworks from Brené Brown that will totally change the way you think about courage, connection, and really showing up in your own life. So let's kick things off with this huge idea. Most of us, we think fear is the enemy, right? We say, oh, if I just wasn't so scared, I could do that thing. But the research tells a totally different story. The real problem isn't the fear itself. It's what we do when we feel it. We put on armor.
Okay, so that's the big question then. If this armor is the real obstacle, what on earth does it actually look like in our day-to-day lives?
Well, it's our gut instinct, isn't it? The second we feel afraid or vulnerable, we try to shield ourselves. And that emotional armor, it feels safe. It feels like the smart thing to do. But as we're about to find out, that self-protection comes at a massive, massive cost. It actually pushes us further away from the very things we want the most.
So let's get a really clear definition here. Armor isn't just one thing. It's a whole collection of our go-to moves, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions that we use to dodge the discomfort of feeling vulnerable. Think of it like your automatic defense system.
And this armor, it shows up in ways that are probably super familiar. Maybe it looks like perfectionism, obsessing over every little detail so no one can judge you. Or maybe it's micromanaging, or always needing to be in control. Or maybe it's being the knower in the room instead of the curious learner. These are all just different ways we try to create certainty when we feel totally exposed.
Okay, so if the problem is the armor, what's the solution? Well, here's where things get really interesting. It's not about becoming fearless. Nope, it's about completely rewiring our definition of vulnerability. And trust me, this is a total game changer. Most of us were taught the myth on the left. Vulnerability is weakness. Don't show it. Push it down. But the reality, and this is backed by so much data, is that vulnerability is simply the feeling we get when things are uncertain. It's risk. It's emotional exposure. It's stepping into the unknown.
This quote comes from just an incredible story. When Brené Brown was working with the U.S. Special Forces, she asked these elite soldiers for one single example of courage that did not require vulnerability, and they couldn't name one. The whole room was silent. Finally, a soldier who had served 3 tours stood up and said, "There is no courage without vulnerability." I mean, wow, it's not weakness, it is the absolute birthplace of courage.
And this brings us to a super clear, actionable definition. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to show up and go all in, even when you have zero control over how it's going to turn out. Saying I love you first, launching that new business idea, having that really tough conversation you've been putting off. That right there, that's courage. Now let's see how this idea of courage builds into our relationships through this just beautifully simple metaphor. Because just like courage, we often think of trust as this huge abstract concept, but it's actually built in really small, really concrete ways. So the whole marble jar theory came from a story with Brené's daughter. Her friends had shared a secret and she was devastated, saying she'd never trust anyone again. Her teacher used a marble jar in the classroom to reward good behavior, and Brené had this aha moment. Trust works the exact same way. You only share your secrets with people who have earned your marbles, one tiny moment at a time. And here's the best part. Earning marbles isn't about grand, heroic gestures. It's the small stuff. It's remembering someone's mom's name, asking about that project they're working on, checking in when they've been out sick. These tiny, consistent deposits of care and attention, that's what fills the jar. That's what builds real trust.
And here's why this is so important, especially for leaders. You can't just demand trust when things go sideways. By then, it's way too late. Real trust is built proactively, marble by marble, in those everyday moments, so that when a crisis does hit, that foundation is already rock solid.
So all of this brings us to maybe the most fundamental human need there is, connection. But the research shows a really critical and sometimes painful distinction that we have to understand. We often confuse two very, very different paths to get there.
So on the left, you've got fitting in. This is basically being a chameleon. You assess the situation, and you become whoever you think you need to be for people to like you. It is absolutely exhausting, and the cost is huge, because the first person you betray is yourself. But on the right, you have true belonging. And this doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The real courage of belonging is having the strength to stand alone, to be your authentic self,
knowing that you belong to yourself first and foremost. And it's only from that solid ground that real connection can ever happen.
So how do we pull all of this together? I mean, how do we go from just understanding these ideas to actually living them out? Let's look at the roadmap for the work that's ahead of us.
What's so amazing here is that courage isn't some magical trait you're born with. It's actually a collection of 4 skills that anyone, and I mean anyone, can learn and practice. Knowing your values, getting comfortable with vulnerability, building trust one marble at a time, and learning how to get back up after you fall. These are skills we can all build.
And let's be crystal clear about this. The goal is not to live a life without fear or discomfort. That's impossible. The real work is to get better at recognizing our armor, to notice when we're reaching for perfectionism or control, and in that moment, to make a different choice, to choose the courageous path, even and especially when it feels uncomfortable.
So we want to leave you with this one final thought to really sit with. That armor you wear, it once served a very important purpose. It kept you safe when you needed it. But the real question for all of us moving forward is this: what is that same armor costing you today, in your life, in your relationships, and in your work?